The subscription model, to me, it allowed me to give more people access at a lower price, but the better my programs are, the longer they'll stick around with me, the more I'll earn.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
It's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the confusing relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving, and today we continue with our season of subscriptions, a series of several podcasts focused on the subscription business. Today will be especially exciting for me because we have Darren LaCroix. Here are 3 things you really want to know about Darren before we start. In 2001, he won the World Championship of Public Speaking. He runs a fantastic speaker training program. And several years ago, he completely changed his business model from selling products to a subscription business. Welcome, Darren.
Hey, Mark, thanks for having me. I never thought pricing could be exciting and fun, but man, when it impacts your bottom line, you make it fun.
Hey, thanks. Hey, you've had such an impact on my life. 10 years ago, I remember...
We're talking positive, right?
Yes, we're talking positive.
It's good to clarify.
I remember sitting in an auditorium at a Toastmasters Leadership Institute, and I saw you speak for the very first time. And you were amazing. You gave us so many tips and hints. I walked away thinking, why does this guy give away all this information? This is valuable. And what's so funny is I looked into it, I learned that you have so much more than 1 hour worth of knowledge, duh. But that was the freemium model applied to speakers.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Now, since that time, I've given you lots of money.
But I appreciate every dollar.
And I have gotten value out of every dollar I've given you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So 2 more things I really want my audience to know about you. First off, you are not a natural at anything. Well, maybe some things, but not at speaking and not probably at business. You work hard. What's the speaking story that gives us that as an example?
The speaking story started with a business story where after 4 years of business school, I went out to chase the American dream. I love business, and I was trying to find that perfect business. I ended up buying a franchise, a Subway franchise, and I had it for about 1.5 years. And I realized I didn't love the business, and they made some changes. They opened a Subway store right down the road from me, which took a lot of my profits off the top. I had to get a day job in order to help pay my employees, so I didn't default to my loan or didn't go out of business. And it was one of the lowest points in my life, and I don't blame Subway. I ignored a lot of what they told me to do because I thought I knew better. So lesson 1, when you buy into a success system, actually follow it.
That makes sense.
Number 2, though, I thank God for this. At the time, I hated it. I felt like it was the lowest point in my life, and lived with my parents, had a school loan, had a business loan, but then I sold the business at a loss, so I didn't even have a business, but I still had to pay off my business loan. And one of my buddies gave me this motivational tape of a man named Brian Tracy, and driving down the road and just depressed and beating myself up. And he asked a question. He said, what would you dare to dream if you knew you wouldn't fail? And my own answer surprised me. I thought, I'd be a comedian. How cool would it be to make people laugh and earning a living at that? That would be the ultimate. The challenge is I wasn't funny. I had never been on stage, and no one ever told me you should be a comedian. So it was crazy. But I also knew there was a little kid inside me who was jealous of my brother and my cousin, who are naturally funny people. And I just loved the joy that they could bring to people because they were funny. And as a kid, I thought, well, they got more love than I did. And there's probably some truth to that, actually, because of the joy they brought. So I thought that would be the ultimate. And then all of a sudden, my voice of reality said, but Darren, you're not funny. True, but that wasn't the question. The question was, what would you dare to dream if you knew you wouldn't fail? So I thought, you know what? I don't want to live my life with regret of wondering what if. What if I could have? What if Brian Tracy was right? And so I decided I was going to try stand-up comedy once, but I was going to go all out. I didn't want to live the the rest of my life with the regret of wondering what if, but even more importantly, what if I try it, but I only do it half-heartedly? Then I'm really still going to wonder the rest of my life. So I said, all right, I'm going all in. So I went to a little comedy club near my house, and I had never been to a comedy show in my life. And I walked in, the headliner that night his name was Chris McGuire, still a writer in Hollywood right now, actually. And he's very approachable. And I was just this scared little kid who is a total introvert. I walked up to him and I said, hi, my name is Darren. I want to try this. What do I need to do? And he asked me a question. He said, are you funny? And I said, no. And he said, good. Good. What do you mean good? And he went on to explain that anyone who is a comedian is very different to understand that people who are naturally funny, people who are class clowns, people like my brother and cousin who I wanted to emulate, he said, that's one skill set, being funny around your friends. But he said, if you gave those class clowns a microphone and put them in front of a group of 100 strangers, they couldn't make them laugh. He said, that's a different skill set. And then he leaned in and said, but that one can be learned. And it's like, ooh, he gave me this little ounce of hope. And he said two things. Number one, you got to get the book. Get the book. Get the information from someone who's been there and done that. So he recommended this book called Stand Up Comedy, the book. And then number two, he said, you need to go to open mic nights and watch other people just starting out. Well, that made a lot of sense to me because when I told my friends and family, they compared me to Jerry Seinfeld, someone at the top of their craft. And he was saying, go compare yourself to someone else who's starting out. And that was, without those two bits of advice, I wouldn't be doing this for a living right now. And so, and Mark, interestingly, it's enough. I was thinking about that how that relates to pricing. It's like so many people just pick a price and they don't know what Mark Stiving knows. They just pick a price without having a clue. And I was going to try to be a comedian without having a clue. So the best thing I did is I asked for advice. The first thing someone who knew said, go get the book. And I think that's a business lesson. That's a success lesson. That's a challenge, life challenge lesson. You get diagnosed with cancer, go find other people who had that same diagnosis. What did they do? What books did they read? What habits did they create? Anyway, so I think it all relates. And so I'm glad I was clueless because I think ego is the biggest thing that stops all of us. I'm glad I was clueless. I knew that I didn't know. So I went to this little open mic night, the only one I could find in Boston, called Stitches, little comedy club outside of Fenway Park. And I was on Sunday night. So the comedy show was Friday night. On Sunday night, found the first open mic night I could. Walked in, it was a sticky floor. You could smell the stale beer. And I watched people go up for their first time, and they were horrible. And I thought, I could do that. It actually, in a weird way, inspired me. So I got the book. I went to Stitches every Sunday night for 2 months and went through the exercises in the book. I tried out and created a little routine based on my life from exercises in the book. And April 26, 1992, I brought 26 of my friends with me to witness this. And I put it on a video camera to make sure I could prove that I did this, because none of my friends, no one in their wildest dreams would have ever thought me, Darren, would have tried stand-up. So I walked up on stage. I was nervous. I was shaking. And I was telling this one joke about Dr. Robert Goddard. And he had launched the first liquid fuel rocket in history in my hometown. And I was making light of it because it only went 41 feet high. But I was so nervous that what I was saying and what I was doing, my body language was not in sync at all. It looked like an old lip sync movie that was not in sync at all. And I said, the rocket took off and it went vertically, but my arm motioned horizontally. And I realized at that instant what I did, and I just reacted, and I said, shoot. It's not the actual word I use, but you can figure that one out. And all of a sudden, everybody laughed. And I'm looking around in astonishment. I'm like, why are you laughing? That's not where you're supposed to laugh, but I'll take it. That's the result I wanted. And I remember walking off stage, and one of the other comedians put his arm around me to console me. He said, don't worry, man, it's just your first time. And I remember thinking, don't worry, it's just my first time. Did you see what I did? I got a laugh. No one told me I could do this. And I just dove in. I got every book that I could, found every mentor that I could, took every class that I could. I didn't give myself a deadline, but I just said, I'm going to figure this out. And I never looked back. And stand-up comedy led to speaking because my mentor said the number one habit is stage time, stage time, stage time. They say anytime you don't get on stage is a day that you don't grow. And so I never looked back. I took stage time to heart. In fact, that's how I found Toastmasters, and Toastmasters helped me find speakers, and I didn't even know it was a profession. So kind of a long story, but that's kind of my story, that I just persisted until I figured it out. I didn't have an end date. I just knew the end game.
And I think, first off, the story's fabulous in that you studied, you learned. But what I really like about that is that you turned around and said, I can teach other people because I had to learn it. It wasn't just natural to me.
Yeah, people who are natural, sometimes they're funny, but they don't even know why. You know, they might have some insights that could be helpful, but they're not great teachers.
Yeah. And now the reason that I'm here, and this is the second additional, or the reason that you're here, and this is the second additional item that I want people to know about you, is not only do you teach speaking skills, but you teach the business of speaking. And you've always been so open about what you're doing or trying in your business. And that's really what I wanted to talk about today. Let's start by, what did your business look like before you started the subscription business?
Well, initially in the speaking world, I kept getting told, you got to write a book, you got to write a book, you got to write a book. And I'm like, write a book? I don't even like to read. I'm dyslexic. But you know, enough people told me, and enough people who are in the position you want to be in, if they all are in common and say the same thing. And I ponied up and wrote a book called Laugh and Get Rich. It was a combination of business and humor. So I went and I interviewed CEOs who use humor as part of their business plan. And I shared their stories, and I learned a ton in the process. And that became my keynote speech. Before I started getting big fees, I would speak and I would sell my books in the back of the room. So I'd speak for free. And then when I started getting paid as a keynote speaker, when my value went up, my price went up, but I also still sold in the back of the room.
By the way, good choice of words there.
I know who I'm talking to. And then after a while, I started realizing, after I won the world championship back in 2001, I realized that I didn't want to teach speaking. That was not in my future, because I saw so many horrible presentation skills speaker. I mean, horrible. I'm like, I don't want to be in that category. None of them are any good.
Yeah.
None of them really ever helped me. And I don't want to be labeled as one of them. And my my speaking mentor, his name is Rick Siegel. He said, Darren, you won the world championship. That's what people want to know from you. Create a program or a product, if you will, on how to be a better speaker. So he wouldn't let up. So I finally, just to shut him up, I created a program called Speak Like a Champion. And I had documented my whole process and my speech and how it evolved. And lo and behold, it became my number one revenue stream. Because selling a $20 book versus selling a $100 product in the back of the room to the right audience, having the right product for the right audience. And then I realized, you know what? I'm actually really good at putting together programs. And I realized I'm a really good speaker. I'm an amazing teacher. And so to me, it's like a puzzle, putting together the pieces of the puzzle without having the picture to look at. That's creating a product or a program on how to. So how to create a great speech, how to create an unforgettable presentation. So I realized I was good at it. So my model became, I had a program called Own the Stage, create your keynote by next week. So I had all these different programs. I did really well. So I think at one point it was like a $250 or a $500 package. And I would sell a lot of them. That beats the heck out of a $20 book. But again, if you're in front of the right audience with the right offer and the right product. And then, my friend Ed Tate, who's a world champion speaker also, he and I were in Europe, and we were doing a tour, and we did, I think, 12 different cities in Europe. And he was selling digital programs, digital products. And here I am calling back to my office manager and sending orders to her, and she'd ship them over because I couldn't bring enough product with me for 12 different cities in Europe. I didn't want to lug that kind of product. So I took a hit on the shipping and, mailed it over to them. And man, and I looked at Ed, and he's selling digital product, and this is when, MP3s became more commonplace. And I looked
Darren,
at what,
just so our listeners know, what we're talking about is essentially a book size or piece of plastic that's got paper inside it, DVDs or CDs inside it. I'm sitting here looking at several of them on my bookshelf right now, Darren.
yes, thank you for paying that mortgage payment for me.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I mean, these are the old plastic cases with CDs or DVDs and a physical workbook that went with it. And, it's heavy, it's bulky. And if you're selling a lot of them, you need to carry a lot of them. And I hated that. And at that point in time, I want to say this was like 5 years ago, and I realized I had just bought my assistant a computer, and it didn't have a slot drive. And then I realized the woman I was dating at the time, she had a computer and it didn't have a slot drive. And I'm like, oh, my whole business is becoming obsolete. So I was doing really well, and I realized I had so many options. I thought, okay, number one, what if I took all these programs and made them digital? And what instead of selling them separately, what if I just put them all together and let people access them for a subscription fee? Because Mark, as you know, in a speaker's the traditional speaker's business model, you speak, you earn a fee, sell back of the room, earn a lot, you're unemployed.
Yep.
You have another speech, you earn a lot, you're unemployed. And I hated that. So the subscription model, to me, it allowed me to give more people access at a lower price, but the better my programs are, the longer they'll stick around with me, the more I'll earn. So it became a one or two decision thing, as opposed to which program do you want, how much. And it just it simplified, and yet gave me, took that unemployed part out.
What were the price points on the higher end products before you went subscription?
The highest one was $1,000. Own the Stage was $997 for just that one single program. But then I had Secrets of Storytelling, which was a $500 program. Get More Laughs by Next Week is a $500 program. So I think I put the package together of all my big programs, and I want to say I think it was $1,500 or something like that. I don't even remember.
Okay, so let's say it's, let's use Own the Stage for a second. It's $1,000. What was, when you first started the subscription business, what was the monthly fee to be part of that?
You had to go and brag about me being transparent, right? Now I have to be transparent.
By the way, it's totally okay if you say, look, I don't want to have that conversation.
I'm just having fun. If it's going to help anyone, I'm all for it. I didn't, at the very beginning, when we started a subscription model, it was, I think, $29 a month.
Yeah, I was one of your very first subscribers.
Yes.
And you didn't raise my price for 2 or 3 years, which I was really happy about.
Yes. Yeah.
But here's the problem.
That's because I didn't ask Mark Stiving for advice. And then when I did ask you for advice, I was too ignorant to listen.
I always say raise prices on other people, not me. So I could imagine being in your shoes and thinking, someone could pay me $30, watch Own the Stage, and I just missed out on $970. Did that go through your mind?
It went through my mind, but honestly, I didn't worry about that as much as my total focus was creating reasons to keep people to stick around.
Oh.
That became my focus, because it becomes a pure motivated business where I'm only going to earn more if I'm giving them reasons to stick around. So as you remember from the old days, we used to have a monthly call with 2 champions.
Yep.
Well, now I have a weekly call with 2 world-class coaches on a Zoom call, and we coach people live so everyone else in the membership can watch it and witness it. The longer I can keep them around, the more I'll earn. I was just trying to get them in. Because even though, the $1,000 is great, I wanted to get rid of that lull in my business in between speeches.
Yes. Well, many, many companies are going from selling products to selling subscriptions nowadays. And it's partly for that reason. It's, I've got next month's revenue already booked now. It makes life a little bit smoother. And what I love about what you just said is one of the most important things in running a subscription business is retention, right? How do I not churn out my customers?
Yep.
And you just said, I had to focus on what do I do to keep my customers, keep people paying.
Mm-hmm. I had heard a great bit of advice from Raymond Aaron, and he said, they'll come for the content, they'll stay for the community.
Oh, nice.
And it's brilliant. And so that's why I was trying to lure people in with the $1,000 product that they could get for a minimal price, and then get them connected to us and have them feel like a part of the family, if you will. And it's taken me till now to really get that to gel.
A lot of times when people are in your shoes, they focus on something called customer acquisition cost. Is this something that you measure, that you watch, or is this just, I go out and do my thing and I bring customers in?
Do you want me to be honest or sound?
Absolutely. I want you to be honest as heck.
Okay, so no, I don't focus on that. I know it should be my main focus, but I'm easily overwhelmed. I'm really good when I focus on one area. So what I did do, Mark, instead of that, because a lot of my onboarding comes from me speaking, whether it's for a fee or for free. So my cost of acquisition, the client who's bringing me in to speak for free, they cover all of that. Now, it is my time, but what I wanted to do to get the subscription model going the way I wanted it was to more focus on the churn rate, if you will. And what I learned from other people who have communities was the onboarding, how important the onboarding is. That those first 3 days, those first week that they spend with you determines the trajectory of your whole relationship. So one of the things that I do that a lot of people probably think is stupid, but when you can do something that has right up front that gives emotional impact, if you've heard Michael Haig, our friend, say, elicit emotion. So one of the things that I do is when every new customer comes on, by the way, as soon as we get off the phone, I'm going to do this thing with 3 new customers. I create a personal video to them. It's 1 to 2 minutes long. It's a video email called Bomb Bomb. I hold up a sign with their name on it that they know this isn't a blanket anything. This is for them. And I speak to them, and I can't tell you, maybe guessing 10% of them reply to me that I'm like, hey, Olympia, thanks for joining Stage Time. I'm really glad to have you here. Thanks for trusting me and my team. And here's 3 quick tips to get the most out of your experience with us. So what I realized from a subscription model, if they're logging in, they're getting value. My biggest challenge is getting them to log in, even though they paid for it. It seems ridiculous, but that's what I'm finding is the challenge. So I give them those 3 personal tips, and then I send them a handwritten welcome note. Now, some people still opt off right away, but a very small percentage. Most people, I went from the average churn rate being 5 months to 6 months to 8 months to now 13 months is the average churn rate for me. From what I understand from one of my office managers, she says it's really the best. Nobody else in the business is bragging about anything better than what we have in terms of time, which I'm proud of. And it helps me realize I'm delivering value, but it's still my challenge to get them to log in. So I've got to give them reasons to do that. So onboarding I found was the most helpful for my subscription business.
Fabulous. That was just an amazing story. And what I love about that is you may not know all the metrics and stuff that we use when we think about managing subscription business, but you inherently get it. And you're testing and trying to figure out, how do I make this work? Yeah.
So I've been as far as the acquisitions price or cost of acquisitions, I am starting to play around with some free webinars and testing Facebook ads to see, what it costs me to get a customer and how long they stick around. And so I've been playing around with that, which is beautiful because I don't have to be on stage to do that. So it allows me to focus some work when I'm not on stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want, I'd be happy to talk to you about a really interesting metric. We do this off the podcast. I call it the viability metric, but essentially you take the lifetime value of your customer, divide it by your customer acquisition cost. And that tells you, it's a nice measure of, say, profitability. How profitable is a customer to me? And so we could talk about that later if you wanted to. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, especially one of my office managers. Her name is Vicky. She's a data geek. She's the
Oh,
one who keeps track of the churn rate. She gets totally excited and jazzed over doing those numbers and tracking those numbers. I'm trying to implement the things that affect those numbers.
yes. Well, the other thing I remember about you a lot in your program, Get Paid to Speak Next Week, is you did metrics all the time on every speech.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so now it's just a matter of taking that same concept and applying it to the rest of the business.
Correct.
Now, there happen to be, whenever we're managing subscription businesses, there happen to be 3 different revenue buckets we have to focus on. And you focus, from our conversation so far today, you focus a lot on 2 of those buckets. You've got customer acquisition down. You've got retention, or think of that as negative churn, right? How many people do I keep, not how many did I lose?
Correct.
Then the last bucket, which really fast growing subscription companies focus on, is called expansion. And expansion is, how do I get more money out of my current customer base? Do you do anything in that respect that you can think of?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the ways I do that is we have the online community. So we teach the business and we teach the skill. How to give better presentations and how to build your business, whatever business that is, through speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So what we also do is we have live events, and now we're adding 6-week masterclasses. So what I'm doing is promoting it to my own people, my own subscribers, but I give them a discount on coming to an event or joining a 6-week masterclass. So they don't get them for free. Now, I do have what's called a platinum membership, which they pay $397 a month or like $3,900 for a year, and they get the events included. But to the other 2 levels, the business mastery and presentation mastery, they get a discount on any of those events. So anytime one of my members comes to an event, I get another influx of income from them, but they get a nice discount compared to the outside world.
Nice. And so you've got a series of events. We could think of those, in my parlance, those would be options or add-ons that we're going to go sell to people, which is pretty spectacular. And then you also have, we talked about this a little bit beforehand, you also have the expansion to get somebody moving from just the speaking to the business side. And so that's an add-on or an we would
Upsell.
think of that as a cross-sell or an upsell at that point.
So they pay us a higher monthly fee, and they get access to all of my business courses as well as 2 business mentoring calls each month.
This is fabulous. This is fabulous. Hey, can you ask me that question you asked me just before we started so we could talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, so whenever I talk to Mr. Stiving, I know I'm going to get spanked around for this, but I'm okay. It makes me better. Get slapped around by the master. It's like, now you're my Alan Weiss. Alan used to slap me around in the early days. He was a business mentor, but now it's Mark. So my question is, how do I know when to raise my prices? And because it's obviously taking a risk, because I might earn more per customer, but I might lose on the retention. So how do I know how much to increase the charge? And should I even, well, number one, should I increase the fee, and how much? I don't want to complicate this, Mark, but I also allow people that if they want to pay an annual price instead of paying monthly, and that has been huge to my business because a lot of people don't want that monthly fee, so they pay me annually. So it's still recurring income if they continue. And that was huge. I didn't know how that was going to go over. That was huge because a lot of people don't want to see that subscription each month. Anyway, so how much do I raise it, or do I raise it, and then how much?
Let's skip the annual conversation for now, and let's just talk about the increasing of the price, how much, et cetera. First thing, you can test this, but my first recommendation would be to do what you did early in the process. If you recall, you let me be in for 3 years or something at the really low price. And then eventually you said, Mark, I got to raise your price. So I quit. But
He was out.
yeah, but what you could do very easily is start by not raising prices on your current customers.
Yeah, I wasn't planning on it. I definitely wasn't planning on it. I wanted to test with new customers.
Yes.
and kind of grandfather the other ones in to be able to have that comparison. And and then if they leave, if they want to come back, because it's one of the cool things is I know we're delivering value because a lot of people come back.
Nice.
But I'll obviously did come back at the higher fee.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if they leave, they're going to come back at the higher fee. That's one reason that they're going to stay now. But the other thing that you can do is once you start getting people to come in, watch your churn rate at a higher price, I should say. Watch your churn rate and see how that compares to the churn rate of the first set that came in.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So as you're watching your current new members, compare those to the new members with the higher price.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're churning out faster, then maybe that's not the right answer. And there's a formula for this lifetime value that we talked about. You want to calculate what's the lifetime value of this customer at different prices and different churn rates. My guess is that they're not going to churn that quickly, but maybe something else you could consider doing. It makes your customer acquisition a little bit harder, but it makes your churn much lower, is have an initiation fee. Have some fee that says, look, it's $100 to get started, and then it's $39 or $49 a month after that. And the reason for that is people are much less likely to churn out once you can land them. Now, how much do you raise it? There are ways that you can measure this, but probably the easiest thing to do is to test it. Since you run all these customer acquisition metrics anyway, you go out and you do speeches and you know how many people you expect to sign up for any given speech. You could simply raise the price to $49, test it, see what kind of response you get. You could raise the price to $59 the next speech or 2 or 3 speeches later and see what kind of response you get. So you've got the ability by the way you run your business to know the answer to that question with testing it your way. But
how do you know where to start the test?
Well, I know what my gut would say.
Mark Stiving, is it?
Say that again?
I said, I'm not trying to turn this into stump Mark Stiving.
No. I don't know the numbers because it's up to your market. It's up to what the people say and who the market is and their willingness to pay. One of the things that you do a lot is you focus on Toastmasters. And inevitably, Toastmasters, I think, have a lower willingness to pay than other people do.
Right.
And
I'm definitely moving away from that.
Okay. And if there was a way to do market segmentation where we have programs for business people and programs for Toastmasters, then you could probably get away with different price points for those as well. But it's hard for me to be able to say this is the number. What I would do is suggest you test it. And you also want to watch that churn rate. Can I ask you one more question, totally unrelated to pricing?
Absolutely.
Our listeners are very smart people. They're at least partially technical people, and all of them care about business. And I would guess some of them dream about someday becoming a professional speaker. What advice do you have for them?
The same thing I would tell anyone about any goal or dream is find the people who are been there and done that and ask them the advice. Get the book, get the information. Because there's so much there's so much information out there. There's a ton of bad information. Well, talk to the people who are qualified to recommend something, you've got to want to be on the stage. You've got to have it as a desire. Even if you're afraid, that's okay. That's normal. Congratulations. But I struggled, part of my story, for 7 years in Toastmasters. And I was the king of the club. But in the club, yes, that's nice because I was stage time is what I learned from my mentors. But what I wasn't doing was learning world-class techniques. I didn't realize there were world-class techniques. Well, of course, there's world-class techniques at in every segment of every market.
Yes.
So if you want to be world-class, you've got to learn world-class techniques, and you're not going to learn them from somebody who's half as good as you. So it wasn't until I met my coach, Mark Brown, in 2001, when he showed me world-class techniques that my speaking changed forever. Even if I didn't win the speech contest, I was a different speaker because I knew the higher level, those little tiny intricacies that make all the difference. And so be a sponge. Go to people who have been there and done that and ask them for advice, because they think differently than the average person.
Yeah, I think that was absolutely brilliant advice. I'd like to add one little piece to that, and that is you can't just be a professional speaker. You have to be an expert at something.
Yeah, you have to have your area of expertise. I tease people who, bless them, they don't know, but you look at their business card and all the things they could speak about, there's a comma. I speak about this, comma, this, comma, this, comma. For every comma, I heard it said, it's like your fee goes down $1,000 because you can't be an expert in everything. If I get a call to be a leadership, for a leadership speech, there's a billion leadership speakers out there, but that's not my expertise. That's not my experience. I couldn't teach you something I haven't done. Now, I could teach leaders how to give a unforgettable presentation, but I couldn't teach them leadership because I haven't been there and done that. So I think it's understanding and getting clear, what's the problem you help people solve? And then your side effect or your back end is your business. So I think, when you're the person on the stage at any meeting, I don't care if it's a Rotary Club or Kiwanis Club or 10,000 people in a stadium, you need to understand how you help them solve problems. And when you're the one on the stage, you don't have to network your butt off and hand out business cards and do follow-ups. You're the expert. You're on stage. Now it's what you do with that privilege of the platform that gets people to come to you and give them their business card.
Excellent. Darren, thank you so much for your time today. If anyone wants to contact you, how can they do that?
Just check out DarrenLaCroix.com. Darren, DarrenLaCroix.com. Or if you're interested in learning, StagetimeUniversity.com.
Excellent. And Darren, every week I give away a copy of my book, Impact Pricing, to my favorite answer to some pricing question. And you know what we're going to do for this week's pricing question?
What's that?
Whoever can give Darren better advice than I did on raising his prices. What would you advise Darren to do? My favorite answer will win a copy of my book. Post your answers on LinkedIn. We're all also write out that question. And remember, keep it pithy and interesting. Episode 11 is now in the can. Hopefully you got value out of this. If you did, would you please like us on whatever podcast feed you use? It will really help us out. Any compliments, suggestions, or questions can be sent to me directly, mark@impactpricing.com. Finally, please join us next week for another episode of Impact Pricing.